With me is Barbara Bavis, and we're going to provide you with an introduction to Congress.gov. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, now you should be able to see my screen. So Congress.gov replaced our Thomas site that you might have been familiar with back in 2016. It does a lot of things that Thomas could not. It uses responsive web design, so it'll scale to whatever device you're using, whether it's a tablet, phone, or desktop. It's also much more browsable than Thomas. Congress.gov is built around a filters menu, so you can perform a very general search and then use the filters to narrow down your result. So at the top, you see the global search box. By default, you're only searching materials from the 116th Congress, the current Congress. If you click on the drop-down, you can change that to search materials from all Congresses. And when I say materials, what do I mean? I mean legislation, committee materials, which will include things like committee reports. It will also include House and Senate communications. If you don't know what those are, House and Senate communications are generally petitions or memorials that are sent to Congress by state and local governments. They're also agency reports that are sent to Congress by agencies that are required by legislation. The Congressional Record, which is a record of debates in the floor of Congress. Members, which is member profile pages. I'll talk about that a little bit later. And executive nominations. In addition to searching, you can also browse Congress.gov collections. So if you go up to the top and click Browse, first you choose your Congress up at the top. By default, it's the current one. And you see the different collections you can browse. One that I like to point out is that you can browse legislation by subject. There are two subject vocabularies that are assigned to legislation by the Congressional Research Service. Policy area subjects is about 30 terms. The vocabulary is about 30 terms. And one policy area subject can be assigned to a piece of legislation. So, for example, if you were interested in legislation that affects environmental protection, this would be a good access point for you. And you can choose prior Congresses up here at the top. So in addition to the policy area subject vocabulary, you also have legislative subject terms. Legislative subject terms is a much broader vocabulary. It includes the topics that you would expect, but it also includes geographic entities and organization names. So if you're interested in legislation that impacts a particular place, you could look under geographic entities, and that would be a good access point. Organization names mostly consist of governmental entities. So that's another access point. The other thing is more than one legislative vocabulary subject term can be assigned to a piece of legislation. So unlike policy area subjects where they just assign one, here you could have multiple ones assigned to a piece of legislation. Okay. Next, I want to point out underneath the search box, you have the most viewed bills. These are the bills that are capturing the greatest amount of page views on a given week. Right now, they're all from the 116th Congress, but you can sometimes see ones from prior Congresses appear. And if you click on top 10, you can expand the list. When we have an archive going back to 2014, July of 2014. Underneath bill searches and lists, these are topics that are frequently of interest to our patrons. You can find legislation introduced by sponsor, either in the House or Senate. So if you click on that, here's the House. You just click on the letter, the first letter of the last name of the representative, and then start over here on the left, you'll find the representative, and then you can continue across, and you can quickly access the bills they've sponsored, amendments they've sponsored, as well as bills they've co-sponsored. You can also look at legislation that's been introduced in a given Congress. By default, that'll take you to the 116th Congress, but you can also choose prior Congresses. Public laws are, of course, laws that, legislation that became law. And by default, you'll look at the 116th Congress, but you can look at prior Congresses as well. The U.S. Code is federal legislation, federal laws that have been categorized by subject, and the subject corresponds to a title in the U.S. Code. Appropriations. So we try to make it easy for people to track appropriations legislation by dividing it up into tables. So first, you pick the fiscal year. You can see when the table has been updated if you click up here and click Read More. You can see the updates that have been made. Also, if you're looking for sub-allocation reports, sometimes called 302B reports, you will find those up at the top under Read More as well. So, under the appropriation table, you've got different tabs. You've got a tab for regular appropriations, continuing resolutions, supplementals, and the budget resolutions. And the way they work is the same. You start over here on the left with the bill, and then you continue to the right as you go through the legislative process. So here you're going to find things like roll call votes, committee reports, and conference reports. People often use when they're using creating a legislative history of an appropriation bill. Okay, continuing down the screen under current legislative activities, whenever either chamber is in session, you've got a link to a live video feed. We'll provide you with a video from the floor. As you can see, what they're considering on the floor today is linked, so you can go and take a look at it. And you've also got two unique items I want to point out underneath the Senate, owing to the Senate's unique constitutional role, executive nominations and treaty documents. I'm going to go ahead and choose executive nominations. So this is a good place to introduce filter menus, which is what makes Congress.gov browsable. So by default, right now, you're looking at all the executive nominations in Congress.gov, which is 37,948. Without even performing a search, using the filters menu, I can quickly narrow that down. So, for example, maybe I'm only interested in military nominations from the 116th Congress. I can click on those filters and narrow down my results. So now I've narrowed it down to 1,373. If I wanted to search within that result set, I could click Search Within, and maybe I'm only interested in looking for, say, Vice Admiral. And now I'm narrowed down my results to 37, and I also have additional sort options that I could use in addition to that. So that's just a quick introduction to the filters menu. We'll talk about that more as we go through this presentation. Next, let's talk about the committee schedule page. So a lot of the important work in Congress is done in committee. And so we offer a unified House and Senate committee schedule that you can take a look at to find out what's happening. You've got a daily and a weekly view. Go ahead and choose the weekly view. And if you want to get a weekly alert letting you know what committee meetings and hearings are scheduled for a given week, each Monday, you can click Get Weekly Alerts up at the top. That'll just ask you to sign up for a free Congress.gov account, and you'll get that email every Monday. So to show you what a committee meeting detail page looks like, go ahead and choose one. Of course, it tells you the committee, subcommittee, any related items will display there if they're available. The location, of course. It's going to provide you with a list of witnesses, their biographies, supporting documentation. If a video is available or if the video is live, that will display right here under Video of Proceedings. Okay. I also want to talk about CRS reports. Congressional Research Service reports are now available on Congress.gov. CRS serves Congress, writing authoritative, nonpartisan, objective reports on both legal and policy issues. So you can choose to search them, or you can just leave it blank and hit search. And then you can use a filters menu to find what you're looking for. For example, if you're interested in foreign affairs reports, that were written in the past week, already narrowed down your results. And I want to point out that CRS does update their reports. So if they've updated the report and there are multiple versions of that report as a result, you'll see this little clock icon here where you can click on that and you can go back and read the different versions of the report if you want to see how they've updated it. I also want to point out Law Library of Congress reports. The Law Library of Congress writes reports for Congress. They specialize in foreign law. So they'll typically take a topic, such as, say, the regulation of Bitcoin, and then they'll write a report about how different jurisdictions around the world have approached the regulation of that topic. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is member profile pages. I'm going to go ahead and choose one. Okay, so first thing I want to point out is that I mentioned alerts for the committee schedule page. If you want to get alerts from a member profile page for a member, every time that member sponsors or co-sponsors legislation, you can click on this button up at the top. So you've got contact information, party history, information of the course of their career. If it's a member that's retired and you click on read biography, that biography will tell you where their papers are housed if you're interested in that. You also have under more on this member, see this member's remarks in the congressional record. That will take you to articles in the congressional record where that member spoke on the floor of Congress. We're also frequently asked about which committees a member is assigned to, and you can find that out here. But what most people use this page for is to find legislation sponsored or co-sponsored by a given member. And again, you can quickly use the filters menu to narrow down your results. So for example, maybe I'm interested in the legislation this member sponsored in the 116th Congress. Click 116th Congress, sponsored legislation, and now I've already narrowed it down to 42 results, and I still have my sort options over here. You also have other filters available to you over here, such as status of legislation, where you can find out where the legislation is in the legislative process and narrow by that. So for example, maybe you're only interested in legislation that became law. Another thing I want to point out related to members is right on the front page here, you see contact this member. Congress.gov just added a feature where you can type in your address and you can find out which members in Congress represent you based on your address. Next, I want to talk about legislative process videos. Okay, so these videos provide a quick overview of the legislative process. They're written by the Congressional Research Service. So it's very detailed, but still brief. And you've also got a transcript down here. These are pretty useful if you're teaching, say, a first-year law students or political science students about the legislative process. We also have a translation of the overview of legislative process video in Spanish. So one more thing I want to mention is the Constitution Annotated down here. The Constitution Annotated is written by the Congressional Research Service. It provides a summary of constitutional provisions and the leading Supreme Court decisions that have interpreted them. We like to say it's like reading about the Constitution in plain English. So if you're beginning research on a constitutional law topic, this is a great place to begin. So I'll go ahead, you can search or browse. So I'll go ahead and browse to show you what one of their articles looks like. Choose the First Amendment. And I'll choose tax exemptions on religious property underneath the Establishment Clause. So it provides you with an article. You notice it has footnotes. These footnotes often cite Supreme Court decisions, and now if you go down into the footnotes, you can click on the Supreme Court decision and get the full text. So these are a really great place to start your constitutional law research. And there are also bonus features on the site. Steve has been writing about featured issues in constitutional law, current events that you can get information about. Under Constitution Annotated Resources, there's two things that I'd like to point out that we use often. A table of Supreme Court decisions that have been overruled by subsequent decisions. Also, the table of laws held unconstitutional in whole or in part by the Supreme Court. So these are some great, really useful reference tools that we use often. You can search these tables. You can also sort them as you see, and you can narrow your date range. These have been really, really useful for us. I just wanted to point that out. Okay, so you might be wondering what's included in Congress.gov in terms of content, in terms of date coverage. If you click on Support at the top, you can click Help. And then you see coverage dates for legislative information. This will tell you by document type what's included in Congress.gov. For example, the full text of laws goes back to 1995 or the 104th Congress to present. Let's talk about advanced searches for a minute that are available on Congress.gov. So the first search I want to point out is the advanced legislation search. This one's fairly self-explanatory. You've got different fields that you fill out to build your search. So you pick the Congress you're interested in here. Legislation and law numbers is where you can type in a citation. You can do a words and phrases search here. You can narrow by the type of legislation right here. We talked about the subjects that are assigned to legislation earlier. You can narrow by that. Actions is where you narrow it down by where it is in the legislative process. You can narrow by sponsor and co-sponsor, as well as associated committees. The other one I want to point out is the query builder, and I'll go a little more into detail on this because I think it's a little less self-explanatory. As an example, I'm going to search for the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. Okay, so I'm going to choose legislation. Oh, and I will assume that I know the title of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act and the sponsor in conducting the search. So I don't know the Congress, right? So I'm going to choose legislation. Congress is all Congresses. Okay. Now I know the title, right? So I'm going to choose legislation. Now I'm going to choose the field, all bill titles. And I want to search for it as a phrase. So I'm going to choose contains phrase. Okay. Now I'm going to add another search string so I could add my sponsor. So again, I'm going to choose the field. And I'm going to choose the sponsor. I'm also going to search for the sponsor as a phrase. This has type ahead. So if you type in the first few letters, it'll try to autocomplete it for you. So there's the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act. If there'd been more than one result that matched my search, you'd see a browse screen here. Another thing I want to point out is the Search Tools page up here at the top. When you want to conduct advanced searches in Congress.gov, this is a great place to go, particularly search operators. Congress.gov does support Boolean-style operators. So if you use AND, for example, in capital letters, I want results that contain both elementary and secondary. I would put AND in capital letters between them. Another one that people frequently use is the proximity search. So for example, if you wanted to search for enhanced body armor, those terms forward or backward within 10 terms. This is a little different than what you'll see in other databases. What you have to do is you have to put the terms in quotation marks, use the tilde symbol, and then the number of terms forward or backward for which you want to search for them. Wildcards are also available. So here, for example, if you wanted to search for woman or women, you can use the question mark. And there's a wildcard for an ending as well that is the asterisk. So here, if you want to search for appropriation or appropriations and return all those results, you could use that. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Barbara, who is going to take you into the legislation.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to take over from here and share my screen. Just give me one moment. All right, so I'm going to go back to the home page of Congress.gov. So this is what you're going to see if you log on to Congress.gov. You're going to have kind of a global search box at the top of your screen. And I want to do just a couple sample searches to get our feet wet on what a search looks like and how you can use those filters to narrow down your search a little bit further. So I'm going to start with what we typically get asked for with regard to Congress.gov, a legislation search. And I'm actually going to search for a bill that has become law in this current Congress, the Never Forget the Heroes Act, regarding the permanent authorization of the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start actually by clicking this More Options link here right under my global search box. And then you'll see that that opens up what we call the legislative quick search. And I'm doing this for a reason. I'm going to tell you later. Don't worry about that right now. But I'm going to use this legislative quick search to do my search. So I am searching for the Never Forget the Heroes Act. And I want to note a couple things in this legislative quick search. Note that it defaults to the current Congress. So you'll see the 116th Congress is noted here. If I wasn't sure whether or not the bill I was looking for was being considered in the current Congress or was considered in a prior Congress, what I could do is just select all Congresses from my list, and it's going to search everything from the 93rd Congress forward. If you knew a general date range, but you weren't sure exactly what date, so for example, if you knew it was sometime between 2017 and 2020, you could click one of the Congresses, hold down the Shift key, and then click another Congress to select more than one at once. But I'm just going to go to all Congresses here. Next, you could also narrow down your search if you wanted to by how far this bill has gotten in the current Congress or the Congress in which it was considered. I'm actually going to leave that blank for now and come up to the top and select Include Bill Text in this search. Sometimes when you're dealing with legislative searches, you might have kind of the popular name of a bill, and that might not show up initially in the title that's at the top of that bill's page. So one way to kind of account for this is to include bill text in this search. Another reason to use include bill text in this search is if you're searching for a specific phrase or a specific term that's in your bill of interest. All right, so I have cast my net pretty widely. I'm going to hit search now. And then you'll see on the next page, luckily, I only get 19 search results. I want to note something here. When you're doing your own search at home, you might get thousands of search results. And if you do not worry. It doesn't mean you've done a bad search. It doesn't mean you have to start over. What I would suggest you do is use these filters on the left-hand side that you see here to narrow down your search. But before I even do that, what if I'm interested in keeping track of this search going forward? So let's say I'm interested in a topic area that might be further considered in the current Congress, for instance. I might want to save my search and then set up an email alert on that search. So then I get an email in my inbox every time there's an update to my search. So to do that, first you will have to create an account. Now, I have already logged into my account. If you'll look at the top right-hand side of my screen, you're going to see my username here. All you need to set up an account is to give us an email address and your name, and make it an email address that you actually check, because we do send you a confirmation email. So if you've forgotten your password to that email account, you might want to choose a different email account. Once you've set up your account in Congress.gov, it is free. Don't worry, there is no charge. You can then save your search. So you'll notice on the other side of the screen, there is a Save This Search link on the left-hand side. If you click that, if you're not logged in, it will ask you to log in, and then it will bring you to this screen. You have to give a title to your search. So I'll just say Heroes Act 2020, or it might be 2019, but Heroes Act, actually 116th Congress. Okay, you can set up a description as well. So if you're searching on very similar topics and you want to kind of differentiate them by the description, you can definitely do that, but it's not required. So I'm going to hit Save, and then it's going to ask me, do you want to set up email alerts? We know that your mailbox, your email inbox is full right now. We don't try and overload you. What we will do is if you set up an email alert, it will at most send you 2 emails a day. It will send you an email in the morning if something happened the evening before, and then it will send you an email in the afternoon if something happened during the morning. So don't worry, we're not going to send you an email every time there's a change in your search. We're just going to send you an email, kind of a group email, either in the afternoon or in the morning. All right, so I'm going to click Get Alerts. And this is the reason actually that I use that legislative quick search rather than just the global search box. Because when you use that legislative quick search, you are able to tell Congress.gov when you want an email alert. So let's say I only want an email alert when either a new search result is added, so a new bill is introduced on my search results. That's automatic. And then let's say I only want that, and let's say if there are new text versions of the bills that are already in my search results. You could select as many or as few of these as you'd like. I'll then hit Confirm Alerts. One moment. All right, and then you'll receive at most those 2 emails a day. Now let's say you set this up because you have a research project for work or for school, and now you're done with it. You don't need those emails in your inbox. It's very easy to get rid of them. All you have to do is go up to your accounts information in the top right, click Alerts, and then you'll see Heroes Act is the first one here. I can just click Cancel Alert, and then I won't get those emails anymore. All right, so it's very easy to set up alerts and to cancel alerts. All right, I've just gone back to my search results screen. Another thing I want to note is that, again, if you're doing kind of a research project and you want to just have a list of all your search results, you can download your search results. I'm up here in the left-hand side of the screen, middle left. You can download the first 1,000 results, and it's downloaded into a CSV file, which you would open up using a program like Excel. So it opens up in a spreadsheet. And you can get the information that you see here from your search results. Coming down just a little bit, you're going to notice some options here. You can hide your filters. So if you don't need to use those search filters, you can hide them. I'd like to show them. And there's also a topic here for Show Tracker. I'm going to click that so we do see the tracker. The tracker that you see here um, shows you how far each bill has gotten in the Congress in which it was being considered. So right now we have all Congresses that have Never Forget the Heroes Act in it. And it's showing me, if you look down here, the highlighted option is how far something got in Congress. If it's still being considered, as you see this number 2 is, there'll be kind of a pointer at the end. If it was considered in a prior Congress, so I'm going to scroll down a little bit, here's the 114th Congress, you'll notice there's a there's a straight line at the end. So that is as far as it got in a prior Congress, because as I'm sure you already know, bills die in between Congresses, and they have to be reintroduced into the new Congress to be considered. All right. So I'm going to use these filters on the left-hand side just to give you an idea of what they look like. So I'm dealing with a bill that became law in the current Congress. So I'm going to narrow down to just the 116th Congress. That brings me down to just 3 results from 19. And then I'm also going to come down to status of legislation, which Robert mentioned earlier. And I know that my bill became law, so I'm going to click Became Law. And you'll see we've gone down from 19 just using 2 clicks to 1. And that's the bill we're looking for, H.R. 1327. So if I wanted to find out more about this bill, all I'd have to do is click that bill number, and I'm taken to the bill's summary and status page. Every bill summary and status page is going to look something like this. One difference between bills being considered or that were considered in the current Congress and bills from prior Congresses is that bills considered in the current Congress get this Get Alerts link. So if instead of setting an alert on your search results, you wanted to set an alert on a specific bill, you could do that using this Get Alerts link. Now this bill's already become law, so I don't need to set up an alert on that, but if I wanted to on a bill that's currently being considered, I could just click that and it would get saved into my account and I'd get an email alert when things change. Coming down a little bit further, you're going to see an overview box. This has kind of the most frequently requested information. So who's the sponsor? What committees dealt with this bill? Were there any reports that were created from this bill? What's the latest action taken on it? Are there any roll call votes or voting information that we need to know? So all of that kind of gets put in that one overview box. You'll also be able to see that information in the tabs below. But before I go to the tab information, I want to talk about the right-hand side of your screen. You'll notice that there is a link to CBO cost estimates. So the Congressional Budget Office can get asked to make cost estimates on a bill. And when they create a report or an estimate, they publish it on their website, and we link you to those reports here. So that takes you to the CBO website. All right, scrolling down. For those of you who might have been Thomas users in the past, you might remember a whole page of links that would take you to different information. You had to click it, be taken to a new page, hit the back button to get back to your bill. You don't have to do that now. Now instead, the legislative information opens up in this tabbed format on the same bill summary and status page. And it always defaults to opening up on the Summary tab. Summaries are written by the Congressional Research Service, and they write a summary for every time there's a big change in a bill. So if there's amendments made to a bill, language changes in a bill, a new summary will typically be written here. If you want to see a prior summary of the bill, all you have to do is click to open up this drop-down menu, and then you can select one of the different versions of the bill. So if I wanted to see instead the version that passed the House, I can see that description here. So there's not a lot that you can see here, but because there were some changes that were made, but you can see the different versions of the bill by using that drop-down menu. Another thing I want to note is that if you're more of an auditory learner than a visual learner, so if you'd like things to be read to you, you can do that. The option is right here. The play button is next to listen to this page. And when you click that, it will actually read to you the language that you see on these different tabs. So please feel free to use that. That option is also available on the next tab over, the text tab. The text tab is similar to also to the summary page because you can see the different versions of the bill as it moves through Congress using the drop-down menu. It's going to default to either a text form or an HTML form. But if you want to see the PDF version of the bill, so the kind of pretty PDF version, you can click on this PDF link here. Let me actually open that up. I'm going to open it up in a new tab. And then you can see the PDF. You'll see this link here or this web address up at the top. You can copy that web address and send it to other people if you'd like to send them the PDF copy of the bill. All right. Next over is the Actions tab. This is probably the most popular tab that we get asked about, and it's because it goes over all the actions that occurred or that happened to this bill as it moved through Congress. Now, you're not going to see all those actions up front. What you're going to see is kind of a summary or an overview of the highlights of what happened to this bill. If you wanted to see everything, you'd come over here to the left-hand side and click All Actions. You'll notice also, once you click All Actions, you actually open up some filters on the left-hand side. So if you wanted to filter, let's say, just to voting information, you could do that. Come under Roll Call Votes, click Check All, and it will show me when they voted on the bill itself, amendments, motion to suspend rules. So you can see that just from clicking Roll Call Votes. And you'll notice if you click on one of these votes, it will take you to either the House or the Senate page where you can find information about how each senator or representative voted at that time. Another thing I want to point out, I'm going to uncheck, is you can narrow by which chamber or whether it was a presidential statement, and you can narrow by committee information as well. When you see mentions to the CR, that is referring to the congressional record or the debates of Congress, as Robert was talking about earlier. If you want to see the page on which that debate occurred or that consideration occurred, I'm going to open it up in a new tab, but you can just click the page numbers, and then you can click the PDF link here to be taken to what the actual printed pages of the congressional record look like. For those of you who are really savvy about the congressional record, you'll note that we are linking you to the daily edition of the congressional record. You can tell because there's this S in front of the page number. So we do have copies of the daily edition of the congressional record, and we link you to those pages in the Actions tab. Going further down, if you ever have to do any kind of research when you're dealing with an appropriations bill, an authorization bill, a very large piece of legislation, you'll notice that sometimes these larger bills will gobble up smaller bills, and those smaller bills will become a part of the larger bill that then gets passed. It's hard to track that when that happens. So what we try to do here is let you know if any smaller bills became a title or a part of the larger bill. Now, we don't have that here in this bill, but if you're dealing with those appropriations bills or authorization bills, you might see a lot of smaller bills get listed here as they're gobbled up by that larger appropriations bill. This Titles tab also allows you to kind of search for those smaller bills and figure out what happened to them if they did get gobbled up by a larger bill. Next over is the Amendments tab. You'll see in the Amendments tab, it's just a listing of all the floor amendments that were made on a bill. and how far they got. So whether they were added to the bill or not, whether they passed or not. You can also click on the amendment if you would like, and you'll get taken to kind of an amendment summary and status page where it gives you information about what bill this amendment is attached to and the latest action taken on that amendment. All right, and one thing I want to note about the amendments is you can also narrow down on the left-hand side to which chamber in which that amendment was proposed, the party of the sponsor of the amendment, and the name of the sponsor. So you can narrow down by all those options. Similar filters are available in co-sponsors tab. So these are all the co-sponsors of this bill. You can narrow down to the party of the co-sponsors. So if you wanted to only see Democratic co-sponsors, you could narrow that here. You can also narrow by your state or territory. And we do get that question sometimes where people want to know what their members of Congress, if their members of Congress sponsored or co-sponsored a bill. And you can tell that here. Next over is the Committees tab. Committees tab is where you will get at a glance information about what happened to this bill in the committees that considered it. So in the case of this bill, the House Judiciary Committee considered this bill, particularly the Subcommittee on Constitution, Civil Rights, and Civil Liberties. If that committee or subcommittee created a report, you can actually be directly linked to that report. And I'm going to open it up in a new tab. And you will get kind of a report summary and status page. We're going to go a little bit further into committee reports. I'm going to show you kind of how to search those committee reports. But just so you know, it will show you information about the bill that the report accompanies, the committee, and then the text of the report. And as always, you can open up a PDF copy. One thing I want to note about these PDF copies that I keep talking about, of the reports, of the bills, of the congressional record, is that they are keyword searchable within. So if you, let's just open this one up to show you. If you wanted to search every time heroes shows up, I'm going to open the PDF. I'm okay. I'm going to open the PDF. I'm going to do a Control F find search. I'm going to type in heroes, and it's going to show me every time heroes shows up in this report. Okay, going back to my bill page, I want to show you one last thing, and that is the Related Bills tab. The Related Bills tab gives you a chart that talks about all the bills from the Congress in which this bill was considered. So this bill was considered in the 116th Congress. So these are other bills from the 116th Congress that were noted to be related to the current bill. These relations are noted by the House, the Senate, and CRS. And you'll see here relationships identified by, that will tell you who identified the relationship, and then the latest action taken on that related bill. And they link you to those related bills and resolutions as well. All right. So that is a basic overview of what you're going to see when you search legislation. But what I want to talk about are some other things that you can search in Congress.gov. One thing that we get asked about a lot, and I know we've already mentioned it a couple times in this presentation, I'm going to go back to the home page, is the congressional record or the debates of Congress. What I'm going to do is actually select the congressional record link, which is at the top right-hand side of my page. And that's kind of a link that you're going to see generally at the top right-hand side of your page as you go through Congress.gov. And if you click that link, you'll be taken to the congressional record landing page. On this page, you're going to see the most recent edition or issue of the congressional record. So this is the congressional record from July 28th. It looks like we haven't loaded yesterday's, or they might not have met. But this will show you what happened on the floor. The Daily Digest is going to be a summary of what happened in Congress on that day. And then um, depending on if the Senate met, the House met, or they both met, you'll have the different sections for the House, the Senate, and then any extension of remarks that you might be interested in. You can also download the entire issue via the link at the top of the screen as well. But let's say you want to search the congressional record for a particular topic. You can do that by using this global search box at the top of your screen, using the drop-down menu and selecting congressional record. Let me use an example that we actually got asked a similar question at the reference desk. So the person was looking for all the statements made by Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson, who's the chairman on the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology's Subcommittee on Space, regarding NASA, and particularly the funding of NASA. So the way I would set up this search is this. I would type in here, I've already selected congressional record, I would just type in NASA and then hit search. You can see I've gotten almost 5,600 results. So I do want to do some narrowing here. I'm particularly interested in funding of NASA. So what I can do is use one of those wildcards that Robert talked about earlier. I'm going to delete NASA from my search, and I'm going to type in FUND and put an asterisk. So that's going to be funds, funding, funded, etc. I'm going to then click Search Within. So now I'm only searching within my search results. And then I'm going to hit Search again. All right, so now we've taken it down to about 3,800. So that's still a lot. But we're particularly interested in the comments made by Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson. And the question is there an easy way to narrow down to just a senator or a representative statements? And the answer is yes. If you look at your filters on the left-hand side of the page, you can actually scroll down to member remarks in the congressional record. And then if you don't see your member listed, you can come to either House or Senate. I'm looking for a representative, so I want to be in the House. And click Show More. And then click the first letter of the last name. So I'm looking for Johnson. I'll click J. And then I'll look down my list, and here she is, Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson. And you'll see that's taken us from well over 3,000 down to 136. So these are the 136 results for comments or statements made by Representative Eddie Bernice Johnson regarding NASA that also have the keyword fund or funds, funded, funding, etc. All right. So if I wanted to see any of these pages, all I would have to do, I'm going to just click this third one down, is click the title of the article in the congressional record. I'll see the text, and then if I want to see the PDF or send the PDF to someone, I could open up the PDF, and this is how the pages would look in the printed edition of the daily edition of the congressional record. All right, so that's how to narrow down to comments made by members of Congress in the congressional record. But we also frequently get asked about congressional committee information and particularly committee reports. Now there's a couple ways you can search this. If you're already on a screen where the global search box is up, you just want to use the global search box and not narrow down any further, you could just choose from the drop-down menu Committee Materials. All right, and then do your search. You could also use the More Options search or the Quick Search, select Committee Reports, and then search from there. That's up to you, whatever you feel most comfortable with. I'm just going to go here since I already have. Actually, let me take that back. I'm going to do a global search just to show you what that looks like. And I'm going to search for, here's an example of another question, similar to another question we got. Someone was looking for a bill regarding the redevelopment of old post office buildings. And they thought it was maybe from the 110th Congress, but they weren't entirely sure. So what I would do in that case, select Committee Materials from the drop-down menu, I'm going to type in redevelopment and try to spell it correctly. Um, Old post office buildings. And then I'm just going to click search. All right, you'll notice here on the left-hand side, you're going to see the items that were searched, and they searched all committee materials. So they searched committee publications, committee meetings, and committee reports. If I'm only interested in committee reports, I can deselect the other two. All right. That takes my search results down to 386. Then I could also choose multiple congresses to search within. So the patron thought it was the 110th Congress. You could select the congresses around that Congress. You could select all three of these here, the 111th to the 109th. I'm going to just select the 110th to see if we get any search results that are on point. And here you can see we do. House Report 110-724 and Senate Report 110-501. Both of these deal with the old Post Office Building Redevelopment Act of 2008. So it looks like our patron was right. It was a bill that was considered in the 110th Congress. And if we wanted to see either of these reports, we'd just click on the report number. And then you'll see, excuse me, we get a link to the bill that this report accompanies. We get a link to the committee that dealt with this, that created this report, and then we get the text of the report below. Again, we can always open up a PDF copy of that report. All right. So that's a basic overview of kind of the main searches we get asked about on the reference desk. Another thing I want to note before we leave, or before we open it up to questions, is I want to note here on the home page, Robert has already talked about the ability to find the coverage dates. So I'm just going to go to support, the support menus at the top of the page, and then help. The help page is going to have a link to that information, the coverage dates for legislative information. It's also going to have information about those legislative process videos, frequently asked questions, etc. So that help menu is going to be under the support link at the top of your Congress.gov screen, and it's often going to give you the information you need. If you're having trouble with your search, there's kind of two options you have. If you're having trouble with a technical issue, so let's say you click a link to a bill or a report and it's not taking you to the bill or the report that you were linked to, this give feedback link is what I would use to contact our developers and let them know that there is a technical issue with the website. I know it says survey, which can throw some people off, but there is a free text box within the survey, which you can use to let our developers know that there's a technical problem. If instead, I'm going to close this, if instead you have a problem where you're doing a search and it's not really bringing you back the results that you thought you would get and you want some help about setting up your search, the Contact Us link is going to take you to a couple different options. Particularly, I want to note the Ask a Law Librarian option. So the librarians at the Law Library of Congress, we actually answer those kind of content questions about Congress.gov. And if you click this link, it will take you to our Ask a Librarian page. Right now, with the COVID pandemic, we are not in the reading room, and so we are not answering the phone. But you can use the online form that you see here in the middle of the screen, the link to that, and then you could submit a request using the Ask a Librarian form. I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that we are recording this, and hopefully barring any technical issues with the recording, I'm going to send out the recording using Eventbrite. If you did not log in using Eventbrite and you still want a copy of the recording, this Ask a Librarian form would be the best way to let us know that you want that recording. If you did log in using Eventbrite, we're just going to use the email you used to log into Eventbrite to send you this recording. And I see we have some questions, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We'll get back to information about how to submit questions, and then I am going to kind of maybe go silent for a second to look at your questions. So feel free to submit a question using the chat feature. One thing that I do want to touch on, that I see a question: are committee hearings available on Congress.gov? Right now, committee hearings are not available on Congress.gov. It's something we're really interested in doing in the future, but as of now, they aren't. What I would suggest doing if you're looking for committee hearings and you want to search for committee hearings is going to the Government Publishing Office's website, and I'm going to put it in your search. It's govinfo.gov. Govinfo.gov does have committee hearings. I believe they go back to their selected hearings going back to about 1957, I believe. So if you do want to search committee hearings, you can use that website for that. All right. And Robert, feel free to jump in if you see any questions that I'm not seeing. For those of you who can't stick around for the Q&A and you have to get going, when you exit this webinar, you should see a survey. We ask that you do fill out that survey for us because we do read it and we do try to adjust what we present on based on your feedback. All right, sorry, I'm just scrolling. So if I'm quiet, I'm just scrolling. I got a question about are there similar websites for the executive branch and the judicial branch? So is Congress.gov unique to the legislative branch? It's a tough question to answer. One thing is that that GovInfo website that I typed into the chat, or that you can Google that as well. If you type in GovInfo, it should come right up. Is that they do have, it's the Government Publishing Office's website, so they do have a lot of executive branch documents there that I'd strongly suggest you use, particularly for presidency, those kinds of things. There's also a regulations website, regulations.gov. Let me type that in. That's really great for regulations. You can actually make public comments using regulations.gov. The judicial branch, it kind of depends on the court. So for federal courts, they usually have their own websites. For the Supreme Court, they have their own website as well, which has a lot of really great information. So please feel free to check that out. But in terms of having it in this kind of format, the Congress.gov format is unique to the legislative branch in that way. Let's see. Sorry, I'm scrolling through here. If you see any, Robert, feel free to come in. Oh, I got a question about Eventbrite versus WebEx. If you registered through Eventbrite and you also registered in WebEx, that's fine. I'll just be using the Eventbrite email. And also, if you do want a recording, I really suggest you use the Ask a Librarian website. Let me actually hold on one second, and I will copy that and put it into the chat box as well. So that is our Ask a Librarian website. Oh, and it's 3 now. So if I didn't get to your question, I'm so sorry. Please feel free to use that Ask a Librarian website that I've put into the chat box, both to ask for the recording if you didn't sign up via Eventbrite, or if you just have a question that we didn't get to, and I'm sorry if I didn't. Um, but please feel free to use the Ask a Librarian for that. And again, please feel free to use the survey as well, which you should see when you log off. All right. And thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. I'm going to log off now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.